Thanks, Jakob, for organizing this and providing this lovely space and pizza and arranging this meeting. Today we are going to talk about PowerShell, so we are not going to be using PowerPoint. I created a little bit presentation in PowerShell itself. So let's start that. And I'm going to be sitting. That's unusual, but it will be easier to navigate and everything. Okay. Is it here? Yeah. So first question, can everyone see everything? Is this readable? We tried to tweak it. I've originally had it in like the dark theme, but it was completely not visible. Can you read it? Yeah.
Can maybe turn off some lights.
Oh, maybe, yeah, we can do that.
If you promise not to fall asleep. Because this is like
the only light
on and
switch.
off that I can do. It's good. Good.
Okay, so this works for me. So just before we start, a little bit about myself. My name is Vukašin Terzić. You can call me Vuki, probably be easier. I work as a solution architect for the KPCS. In the last 2 decades, I work in IT, and most of the time I spent in the IT and enterprise infrastructure. I first met PowerShell, I don't know, maybe it was 2009, 2010. It was just version 2.0 was just released. And I hated it. I didn't like it at all. And then shortly after that, I started working in a school. And my first task was to create 400 accounts for new students, to move them in the groups, to remove students that left. And I looked at the Excel spreadsheet with all those changes. And my first reaction was, this has to be automated. I'm not going to be doing this manually. And since then, PowerShell and I are best friends. So that's the story. If you have any question, these are some links, but that's not important. So presentation is about PowerShell Core. We are going to show what's the difference between PowerShell Core and Windows PowerShell. It's not the most exciting topic in PowerShell world that we can talk about. But it is important topic because I feel that the PowerShell team is making a lot of improvements. They are bringing us all those new exciting features, new versions of PowerShell, and people actually don't even realize that there is something new. They still use their Windows PowerShell that they are comfortable with, and they don't take advantage of it. So that's what we are going to cover. We will see what are some use cases and limitations, and most of the time I will be showing the demo. So this is briefly. To start with PowerShell 5.1, that's Windows PowerShell. That's generally available since 2017. It's version that is included in all operating systems that we know today, that we use. It's default shell in Windows 10, and from Microsoft's point of view, this Windows PowerShell 5.1 is completed. Since it's released, they are not releasing any new updates, new features, only critical bug fixes, but they are not improving it anymore. And they don't plan to stop supporting it. It's still there. It's not going away, but it's not being improved anymore. So what they are working on?
May I just add this? The same thing applies also to ISE, PowerShell ISE.
Yeah, I was going to mention that later on that there is no. But you're right. The PowerShell ISE that's included with it. It's not being developed anymore, and that's why more and more people switch to Visual Studio Code and other tools like that. So there is this new thing called PowerShell Core. Originally, PowerShell Core was included in Windows Server 2016 Nano. It was not called PowerShell Core at the time, but it was basically the same thing. And of course, Microsoft was presenting it as a Windows Server Nano has, I don't know if anyone used actually Nano Server. I did quite a lot in the beginning, but Jakub did. But Microsoft stopped supporting it shortly after. And they called it as a, how they said, it was PowerShell with limited functionalities due to limited functionalities or support in Server Nano. But it was actually PowerShell Core, and at that time it was still not open source. Since then, Microsoft released it later on in 2018 as like generally available. I started using it when it was still in preview in 2017, and again I didn't like it. But the first version was I will show you later the commandlets, how many of them were included. But first version was just focused on bringing it to open source, to change it from like Windows Server Nano to independent software that is open source, and they completely run it from GitHub now. So that was the focus of the first version. And as the name says, it's PowerShell Core, and that name comes from .NET Core. So Microsoft introduced a .NET Core framework, which is a lighter version of .NET framework. I'm sure there are people in this room that they know much more about .NET than I do, but specialty about .NET Core when it first came was, yeah, that guy over there. First came was that it was open source and multi-platform. That's what I was going to say. And this brings actually PowerShell possibility to be open source multi-platform framework. And the first version, what they really wanted to achieve was to run it on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And they did that with the limited amount of commandlets. And then there was version 6.1, and 6.1 was focused completely on Windows. And they tried to bring all those commandlets that were missing from the 6.0. And they did, they brought a lot of them, and then from that point they were trying to catch up with all those like automation tools that we use today. Current version was 6.2.4, it was released like I think last week. I was installing it yesterday, so that was the newest one. And you see changes are still coming. So what's the difference between PowerShell and PowerShell Core? As we already mentioned, it runs on .NET Core, it's open source, it's multi-platform, that's all okay. Number of commandlets that you can find on .NET Core is not that great as it is on PowerShell 5.1, but with every version the number is growing, and there are new and new commandlets coming back into PowerShell. Not all modules are supported. We are going to show that a little bit later. There are ways on how you can still use the old modules, but in PowerShell Core you cannot find all your modules that you use every day. Another difference, and this is really strange, and it's not well documented, you cannot like find it, and it's not like general rule, but there are some commandlets, and that's like my experience, that they have different parameters, and they are actually the same commandlet, but it's different on PowerShell Core than it is in the PowerShell. And when I first tried to move one of my scripts to PowerShell Core, I couldn't figure it out why it was not working, because commandlet was there, but then I ended up finding that the parameters are completely different. So that's another thing. There is no ISE in PowerShell Core, so you cannot open ISE and run it from there. You can edit the code, of course, but you cannot run it in the ISE. There are ways to do it, but this is not like included. There are some new capabilities. Some of them are named here. I'm just going to skip that now because we are going to show all of that in demo. So that's the difference. A little bit theory behind it is that now like everyone has an idea. Why is it different?
Can I have a question?
Sure.
How did you solve the problem where you had commandlet that has two different parameters? Did you check for the PowerShell version?
Inside of my script.
Yeah.
Well, that script, I did solve it in that way you are saying with different scripts, but with this particular one where I first time found it, it was the script that I wanted to run on Linux, and I wrote it on Windows, but I needed it on Linux, so I just changed the script inside. So,
Okay. So it wasn't multi-platform. It was
no. That particular one was for Linux, but So how do you solve it? There now with PowerShell like 2.4 and or PowerShell 6.2 something, and PowerShell 7. There are different ways on actually using the old modules and old. At least like I'm trying to play with it. I will get back to that, but I actually use PowerShell Core in production, so you have to be careful and you have to learn a few tricks. So this table here shows the number of commandlets that were included in PowerShell 5.1 and PowerShell 6.2. And so last year when the version 6.2.1 came out, I tried to do a little like test to find out where are the commandlets and how many of them are there. And I had at that time I had 3 versions of Windows 10, and I'm not sure if this table is correct now because I believe that it was not everywhere 6.2.1 version of PowerShell Core, but I don't know. I did this like a year ago, this check, so I don't know if and it will definitely be different now. But what I wanted to show here is how PowerShell grows. And so basically I run this commandlet. We can even try it on this computer now, which just gave me the number of commandlets available on that computer. And I run it on different versions of operating system, and these are the numbers I got. And as you can see here in the beginning, it was like really huge difference between PowerShell and PowerShell Core. And then I did another test. I installed remote server administration tools, and those bring you a lot of new commandlets like, I don't know, Active Directory, Hyper-V, and all of those services. And so the number with setting installed, it's much larger than it was without. Here is double. And here there was no difference because none of that was supported. But with the versions of PowerShell Core and Windows 10, this was increased dramatically. And I think now it's like over 2,000. I ran it maybe, I don't know, 3 months ago, and it was over 2,000 commandlets now. We are still talking about PowerShell 6. So you can see that there is Microsoft is trying. And what can you do with it? Well, I'm not going to go too much into detail on this one because there are different ways on PowerShell 7, but on PowerShell 6 there are a lot of for example, module AZ, Azure. If you use Azure, you probably use it. It's fully supported. But if you use Active Directory, which most of us do in operations and in day-to-day tasks, and you are completely going to hate PowerShell because there is no Active Directory. So none of your scripts, your daily day-to-day tasks, nothing will work. And so how to resolve that? Well, you can try to import module, and you will see the error. This module is not for PowerShell Core. Then you can use parameter skip addition check, and it will try to import it even it's not for Core. In some cases it will work, in some cases it won't. Perhaps those modules are written in a way that it can still run in PowerShell Core. Then there are like experimental features, and I find out this really strange because when I originally started using this, they were like, I don't know, the list was longer than it is now. And I don't remember what was in the list before, but this like changed. So I guess they are not experimental anymore, they are now in production, and so the list was... and if you enable it, then it still gives you some other options to use. And if none of that work, then you can use implicit remoting and actually open PowerShell session to your Windows PowerShell on your computer and use your module from there. So instead of doing this, you do this, but it still works. And I'm gonna back that in PowerShell 7, but this actually works pretty well. The only thing is that you have to understand that the object that is returned in a different session, and you have to handle it a little bit differently, but you still get the result. And see example here, I open PowerShell session. So first you have to create a new PowerShell session, and computer will be local computer because I have on my local computer already Windows PowerShell with Active Directory domain, Active Directory module installed, and then I can run my code block, my entire script in that remote session that is remoting to my PowerShell. So that's like, that can be fun sometimes. I was trying to see how many of those I can do, and I was remoting from Azure to Linux to my Windows back to Azure and stuff like that. And of course you cannot get the results that far, like the third level, but there are still, like, if you want to play with it, you can actually, the playing with it like this taught me a lot. So I learned what are the limitations and what I can do with it and how to get the information I need back. So that's the way around it. It works most of the time, and you can create your scripts in a way that they call like function from Windows PowerShell. And so the question is, why would I do that? Why I don't do the Windows PowerShell when I already have everything in it? There is no like straight answer for that. There are some situations where you don't have Windows PowerShell and you still need to use those things. So the remoting will not be on the local computer, but it will be to some different computer somewhere else where there is Active Directory module installed. Let me show you a little bit more about PowerShell Core before we jump into conclusion. But there is a solution for everyone. So PowerShell 7. What the heck is PowerShell 7? We were just learning about PowerShell 6, and then suddenly there is something new. Yeah, so the PowerShell 7 is that Microsoft calls New Frontier. It's the newest version of PowerShell, and now it's, maybe I forgot to mention before, but PowerShell 6 is different than Windows PowerShell. And it's not just a name. This is like a completely different shell, and it can run in parallel on one system with Windows PowerShell. The exe file is called differently. It's called PwSh.exe. Push. How do you pronounce it in English? Push. So it's push, and it's actually like not an upgrade from 5.1. It's actually a completely new thing. And so PowerShell 7 is again completely new thing, and you can have it in parallel with Windows PowerShell 5.1. And the Windows PowerShell 7, it's just called PowerShell 7. So now we have three. We have Windows PowerShell 5.1, then we have PowerShell Core 6, and then we have PowerShell 7. So these are the three PowerShells that we have now. PowerShell 7 doesn't have Core anymore in the name, it's just PowerShell 7. but it is running on the .NET Core. It is still multi-platform, and the difference between 7 and 6 mostly is that 7 is now gonna be long-term service support channel, so it's not gonna be supported as 6.2 was for like 6 months. It's going to be supported for 3 or 4 years, and that's because it's based on .NET Core 3.1, which is on this long-term servicing channel. And PowerShell support is actually tied to the to .NET Core. So to summarize that a little bit, I think that 6.2 it's gonna be till like, I don't know, like 6 months from now actually. So this is something like that, right? Yeah. And so you get a version of PowerShell, and if you put it in production, then you only have like 6 months support, and then you will have to replace it with a new one. The difference with PowerShell 7 is, and that's like the main difference, is that it's going to be supported for longer period of time. So if you put it in production, you get this stability. And right now there is a release candidate 2 available that came out this month actually in January, and they're expecting it to be generally available in February. So PowerShell 7 is still in preview, but it's actually the PowerShell, if you consider using it, that you should think about primarily. What else is different? Well, .NET Core 3.1 bring a lot of, it's much more closer to the full PowerShell framework, and they managed to implement over 90% of commandlets and functionality that was originally in PowerShell 5.1 into PowerShell 7. So again, more commandlets, more functionality. And funny thing is that they are already working on PowerShell 7.1. And again, PowerShell 7.1 will be on some framework like 4 or 5 or something like that on .NET, and will be only like 6 months support. Support will be only for 6 months.
Will it be called PowerShell Core 7.1?
No, it will be called PowerShell 7.1.
Oh, where's the fun in that?
Hey, it could be called PowerShell Core. You never know. There's still time for them to change, but they already started working on it, and there is no preview yet, but they're already thinking. And actually, like I was active on Twitter when they were trying to, like they were asking questions, what do you hate about your PowerShell or any other shell? Talking too long. And I mentioned few things, and the answer was they are going to implement it in 7.1. Another thing that is still possible with 7.1 is that it might be shipping with Windows already installed, and not with the long-term servicing channel, but if you have those like how it's called, not short-term, quick release, how it's called, the other one.
Windows?
Yeah, in Windows.
Insiders?
Well, no, not insiders, but you have like a Windows server that is supported for 4 years, or you have those Windows supported servers that are supported for 6 months and you have to upgrade them often.
Current release? You mean current release?
No, it's called a little bit different. It doesn't matter. It's but it's so it will be shipped. PowerShell 7.1 will be shipped in those kind of Windowses.
I have a question again. So PowerShell Core 6.24 is now valid for half a year.
Yes.
And PowerShell 7
is going to be valid for 4 years.
So what's really then? That's not really attractive for PowerShell Core 6.24, right?
Well, it's. I don't think people will rush into installing it into production. But as I said, they didn't have option because .NET Core was supported. There was no like long-term release of .NET Core, and they even though they .NET Core 3.1 came out in December, and PowerShell 7 still didn't came out. It will come in February, so that's 3 months difference. And the support for it will not be 4 years from February, but it will be till December 2022, is it, or 2023? So it will be exactly as long as the PowerShell Core on which, .NET Core on which is based.
I mean, if there's a new release of .NET Core, it will be called, it will be a new PowerShell?
Well, no, they. I don't know what's the logic behind it, but the PowerShell 7 is the first long-term version of PowerShell Core. And whoever was using the previous versions, they started using it as they are, and they were supported for 6 months. But before those 6 months, there was a version, like the next version, available that was again supported for 6 months, and the upgrade is easy. You just run a command line and it's get upgraded to the new version. So that's probably like the extra step that you have to do. But if you really need to do it, like to use it, and you start using it, then that's something you have to deal with. But as I said, I think the PowerShell 7 will be actually the first interesting release that people will start actually installing on their servers and start using in production. If you wanted to use it on Linux, you were probably using it already. If you are using, we will get back to that, but if you are using Azure Shell, you are already using PowerShell Core, because that's what is running on.
So 6 is compatible with 7?
7 is compatible backwards with all, like with 6. Yeah, everything what is included in 6, it's included in 7, but 7 has a couple of new things, and those are the improvements over the PowerShell 6. And none of this is PowerShell 6, and none of this is in PowerShell, Windows PowerShell. So take a look. I'm not gonna read those. Those we will let me see. Most of those we will show in demo. But those are just some differences. Let me see. I will write it down so I don't forget anything in the demo. But yeah, I can cover that. So these are the improvements. I don't want you to focus on these completely. This is not the reason why you should be using PowerShell 7. This is only something that makes your life easier. Some things are easier to deal with, but I don't expect anyone to start now creating a new script that is based only on PowerShell 7. That's probably can be done in some situations, but I tend still to make scripts that are compatible with as most versions of PowerShell that they can. And I still find myself trying to write some scripts that are compatible with PowerShell 2.0, but not doing that too much lately because all of those servers where there was only 2.0, that those are out of support anyway, so you don't want to be doing it.
I will need to high-five you afterwards. I still have to write scripts for PowerShell.
Really? Why?
Because of Pester.
Oh, right. Pester needs... Can you just say, not supported anymore? Yeah.
By the way, is anybody cold? Because I'm cold in the back and you are sitting way closer to the window than I am.
Oh, Windows is up? Okay.
But if you're fine, that's fine.
No,
It's just me.
I thought it was air conditioning or something.
You're also the only one with a t-shirt.
Yeah. Right.
Small question.
Okay.
Completion for wearables.
I'm gonna show that.
Okay.
That's not maybe not the correct expression. Not like, okay, I will show that later on. So what's our next It's time for demo. Before I actually jump to demo, is like the clear what are the differences now? I think like the point of this meetup should be that you should understand that what you can do and cannot do with the PowerShell Core, and where actually you can use it and where you shouldn't use it or you can't use it. So if there are any questions.
I would just, let's say a problem that I have when I write some script,
Okay.
and it's using PowerShell Core. Let's say it should run on Linux also, but I want also maybe sometimes to run it on Windows, sorry.
Yes.
Windows PowerShell. And then practically I'm getting into a situation like not to use new features because of
Yeah.
all this
That's
stuff.
but that's like not unique. That's still not that common issue, because most of the people will try to run their existing scripts from Windows PowerShell on the PowerShell Core. And that's like more tricky. But your situation is that you actually cannot use any new features if you want to run it backwards. Then there is a way to detect version, simple. And then you can have different script blocks for different situations. I didn't mention earlier, but I was going to demonstrate that. But PowerShell Core is much faster than the PowerShell, than the Windows PowerShell, and not just because they did some optimization inside of PowerShell, but because .NET Core framework is much faster. And for that reason, I'm trying, wherever I have Core installed, I'm trying to use Core for some operations, and especially now with 7, where you can run things in parallel much easier than you could in Windows PowerShell. Then I'm trying to use Core, but then that's not backward compatible.
Just to give example, I'm usually using join path,
Mm-hmm.
and in PowerShell Core you can give it 3 parameters. Like
Yeah.
you have root folder, your own folder, and then file. So it will merge all these 3 parts together. But in Windows PowerShell you have to first join path root
Yeah.
folder with your folder, and then
And
your
then add
this
with the file, yeah.
Why don't you run it on Core, PowerShell Core on Windows?
Well, if somebody will run it on Windows PowerShell, then the script
will not
is-
work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. So not on Windows, not everybody has Core. Still,
Yeah. I tried to bring Core and we are the IT company, and I tried to bring, and like everyone used PowerShell for their daily tasks, and still people didn't adopt PowerShell Core. And you cannot push anyone, you shouldn't push anyone, but if you see that there is some benefit for you, then I definitely think that you should be using it.
Just also one small question about parallel thing.
Mm-hmm.
In regular PowerShell, you can use jobs,
Yeah, you can.
and
And-
this is technically parallel.
Yes. I'm saying you can use. There is like a parallel ways of running. There is a way of running things in parallel in Windows PowerShell, but here and there is option to use for each parallel,
Okay.
and it's actually very nice.
More lightweight.
Yeah. It's like again, you are paying the price for like those new like spaces in which you run those parallel jobs, but it's like for tasks where you wait for like I don't know, like a computer to respond or something like that. Running things in parallel can speed it up dramatically. And you can configure the throttle limit and how many parallel sessions and things like that. So
but also PowerShell Core it's not part of PowerShell Core, but it's shipped together. There is a thread job thing.
Yeah.
And this is like, so it's not starting new process. So whoever is doing programming, he'll know new process, but it's just new thread inside of same process. And otherwise it's the same. So instead of start new job, you just start new thread job, and the rest is the same. So
So you're just reusing the resources.
yeah. So like script modification is minimal, but cool thing.
Okay.
For each parallel uses run spaces or threads or processes?
I
Not
think
using
it,
7.
think it's,
Do you have demo for this?
well, not big demo, I'm just gonna show the command line.
I just like to see how you can return the result after the jobs.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
it's painful with jobs.
That's the Joseph it is. Okay, so
Can we make the font bigger?
Yeah, that's true.
how do you do that in
It's in terminal options.
Okay, good.
Okay, preferences. Here, and that's on the side. Before you used 14, 16 maybe.
didn't?
Did you save it?
Yeah, I think I did. 18.
Do you use that? To modify it?
Maybe also you can use Windows Plus.
So you call it with PwSh. PwSh.
Is the PowerShell 7 still called push?
Yeah, it
It's
is.
PowerShell again.
It's called push. So I have here installed, and I have PowerShell 6. And you can see that this is the newest version, Darwin kernel of Linux. What's interesting about using it on Mac is actually that I never tried to use it on Mac to manage my Mac. And most of the things that you would like to do, as you do on Windows or Linux, it's not possible on Mac. And it's not because PowerShell is not able to do it, but because Apple is trying to change it. And when originally it was released, it was, I think, Mac OS, I don't know what was at that time, Mavericks or something like that. And many things worked, and then Apple changed a lot of things, and then it stopped working, and Microsoft gave up. But the thing is that actually, how many of you will use it on Mac to manage your Mac? I don't think too many people. But the beauty of it is that I can open it on my Mac and manage things remotely, or even write a script and run the script and test it's working. I can hear, and I can actually run it, test it, and it works great on the Mac. But I don't use it to manage Mac. What Microsoft did lately in PowerShell 7 is that, so you will not see that here, but they improved this, and mostly, so I cannot demonstrate it because this is PowerShell 6. Mostly people rely on this, and you get some more information that you get with dir, with getChildItem. But in PowerShell 7, you can use getChildItem, and you get much more information than I actually get here, this one. So that's all the demo on my Mac, because everything else we can demo there. I do use VS Code, which is also multi-platform, and as you can see, I have here PowerShell integrated, and I can run it. Back to Windows. So here's a terminal. Inside of terminal, I have Windows PowerShell, which I have by 5.1, and I'm not gonna close my. And I have PowerShell Core Release Candidate 2. Yeah, PowerShell, sorry. PowerShell 7 Release Candidate 2. That was released in January. Right. Actually, I don't have a Linux. I do have a Linux somewhere. I have it in Azure. I originally wanted to demonstrate how to install it on actually Linux. So if you are interested to see that, I don't think it's very interesting demo, but I have a Linux machine that was just installed nothing is on it. So if you want, we can connect and I can show you how it's installed. But it's nothing special. I'm going to copy and paste commandlets from docs microsoft.com. So do you want to see that or should we skip it? Okay. All right. So let's see. I have a demo list here. Let's go back here to PowerShell 7 and see what we can do differently now. Font is okay, you can see it. What I actually forgot to mention is you can get PowerShell from GitHub. I said it's open source. You can download it, install it on any device you have. So we are not going to show that. What I want to show, maybe if we go here, no previews, and we start with those. Those are the interesting. Those are actually the new things you don't have any in your PowerShell. Windows PowerShell, so maybe we can show those, so it will be a little bit different for you. I don't know how much time you had. We said that it's going to be an hour.
It's up to you and up to the people.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay.
You can take, well, I would limit it to 4 hours. If we can.
No, I'm not gonna take long. I actually originally prepared for like 45 minutes, so I wanted to do a speed talk, but because you told me that I can take longer than that, so it's fine. All right. So the first thing, for each parallel, that's what we discussed. What's the best day to demo that? So let's see. Is it typing? One.
We can maybe ping Google.
No, it's typing in white.
Is it typing in white?
What?
Maybe just start VS Code and just switch it to white and it will work. And you will have your PowerShell and everything.
Hold on.
Maybe. Or maybe just try PowerShell new profile.
Can you see this? No.
Yeah.
No.
Maybe if you bump up the font a bit.
Yeah. So we're gonna leave this size. Can you read it? So what are we going to do? Okay, so there is a throttle limit. I think that's default is 5, so let's make 20. Yeah, so you can see that the order is not correct because it was processing in parallel, and so this is actually what I want to show, that those, they don't run in order. They actually try to run all 20 of them, and it processed. So I try to use it wherever I can. If I'm, for example, I don't know, creating new users or doing things like that, I do it in parallel because that makes sense. If I don't know, example, maybe someone else can say about example when it's not good to use it. I don't have any like example now, but I'm sure that there are some situations where you cannot benefit from it, but it will actually take longer to process in parallel.
So this work if you need to use credentials in each of the parallel statements?
did use it with credentials, but you cannot have it ask you for credentials. You have to say them.
Right, but
Yeah.
there's no problem possible.
Well, if you mean like accessing different computers and collecting information from those computers, and in that connection string you use, not string, but you use credentials, that's fine, that works.
What about, for example, Azure login thing, when you have some pop-up or anything like this?
Well, if you have pop-up, if you don't have like already stored and logged in your session, then it will be asking you every time. So it's not.
So is the limit here 5?
No,
by
that's
default, or is that
that-
the amount of cores?
no. The default is 5. The default, like the parallel processors, is 5, but you can push it up. So I did 20 now because we have 20 numbers. I actually never tried more than like 25, 30
Okay.
because I didn't need to, but I'm not saying it's not capable of.
It also depends on what type of parallelism it
Yeah.
is. So if you have threads, then if you schedule more than like 1.2,
Yeah,
the amount of the threads that you can run on the computer,
It
it
will-
will start fighting.
exactly, yeah.
But since this is PowerShell, then there is a lot of stuff going on that you can't do on the computer. So maybe if you do some I/O, that would be easier, and you would be more pushed to do a lot of them. But then I know if it can do like async stuff. Ah, interesting. I will have to figure it out.
Yeah. and again, this is still in preview. It's in PowerShell 7 only. It's not on PowerShell 6. PowerShell Core 6. It's in PowerShell 7. Then another thing, and I actually never used it in a real script. I only played with it, but it was on the list I showed previously, and it's this. So, does anyone know what's this?
Journal
Yeah.
operation?
Hmm?
Journal operator? This one?
Like a nullable or something.
Yeah, it's actually means if null. If is null. So let's say X. Oops. They have a name for it. I don't remember the name because, as I said, I didn't use it so much. But basically, so what's X? X is nothing. So X is null because it doesn't exist. So, let's say like this, right? And so I say if I have X, if X is null, then I don't know, write something. If I say A equals X, and if that's, can you see it? Should I switch it to white? Okay. And if that's null, then A is X is null. But if I say X is 1, and then I do the same thing, A is not gonna be X is null, A is gonna be 1. So basically it tells you if is null.
So maybe more usefully if you would do A is X or the default value 10 if you wanted to use it like in your code. So you say I want the value of X, or if it doesn't have any value, I want 10 to be the value. That's how I would use it.
Okay.
That's how did we use it in JavaScript.
Yeah, I'm gonna show you something a little bit different for that what you just mentioned. So, and I don't know how this is called, but there is this thing now, and I really apologize. I don't know how it's called. It has some fancy name. When a PowerShell release candidate 2 was released, like in last week or something, this was on the list of new features, and I actually read about it 1 week ago. So this is like pretty new for me as well. But I think it's a good thing to demonstrate because you want to see like what's different in new PowerShell, and this is currently the newest thing. What's different? So I don't know how it's called, but basically it means that if I have, wait, my x is not null now. So if I have x and I say, oops, folder, yeah, sorry. So can anyone tell me what just happened? X equals 2. But why?
Plus plus.
It's more like if x is null, then
Yeah. Exactly. So if it's null, then then it's equal whatever.
it's like x equals
And so
x or 2.
yeah. And I don't have any scripts with this. For me, like it's a new thing. Then there is another parameter, and that's gonna be, hold on, x equals null. And now how this is called. I wrote it here, the name now, but I don't know.
Which one is it?
Can you maybe just vertically shrink a bit window so I don't see bottom line?
Ah, okay.
Yeah, good.
And then I don't know if it's now 1 or 2. Maybe we should skip it because
Ternary operators.
That's it.
how it's called?
Ternary.
Yeah.
But no, ternary is general
No,
ternary.
no, just
No, it's this
But-
one. The one before is null propagating operator and null callus.
How it's called?
There is one which is in C#, if you ever see it, it's like something question mark dot and then something
Mhm.
that's null propagating operator, and
Okay.
this one should be null callus sync operator.
Okay. So
So you take an whatever. Go on, sorry.
it's fine. So I don't like the color. You can see now that because it was null, then it wrote it's null, and if it wasn't, it will be not null, the result. I don't know, you probably know this from different programming languages. Unfortunately, I only know PowerShell, nothing else. But so these are the new operators, and then we have two more. One is this, and one is this. Can anyone relate to different programming language?
Yeah. It's like
Change
it's in
for-
batch as well.
Yeah.
The old command line.
Yeah, so this one, if it means if succeed, then do this, and the second one is or means that if it fails, then do this. So I don't know. Let's do something simple. What's gonna fail?
Test.
Get item not existing.
Cannot find, and if we say or, it's gonna write hello.
And can you do test item?
Test item.
This is checking if the file exists.
That's gonna pass. Right?
Test path,
Test
sorry, test path.
So
This is not an error, this is just like true, false.
Yeah, test path is never failing.
Yeah.
That's the different thing with the.
But it's still correct, right?
Well, it's not. It says false. It should. Yeah.
Programmatically correct, but logically not. Because this thing or and then it's based on this where the thing fails with exit code non-zero.
Yeah, but
But it
here
depends on your
test
definition of
path doesn't
fail.
fail actually. Yeah.
Yeah, test path doesn't fail, so just
So
take
if,
care of that thing. Some commands in PowerShell don't fail.
What
They
if I
return
don't want
false.
to? What if I want that the foo shouldn't exist? I just check for it and it says false, and that's a success for me.
yeah.
Yeah, but
Could you make
just
a dash note? Like dash notes and in brackets or parentheses?
No, it needs an exclamation mark in front of the ampersand.
Alright.
yeah. Some commands in PowerShell don't fail; they just return false. Something like that.
Okay. And when we are in error, this
You can
is
still
one.
make it fail.
This is one of the. Yeah, you can make it fail. Yeah. So one of the things that I really like about PowerShell 7 is actually the error handling or error showing the errors, and there are a few things. So if we do this, you can see that this looks different. This is not how it looked before, and because there is something called error view, or actually there was always something called error view, but now we have concise view, which actually shows us this nice little text that takes us right to the point and shows us what failed. And if we go back to the normal view, and this is the variable tab that I mentioned before. So if you try to do this in normal PowerShell, and now if you go tab, it actually takes you to the file system. It doesn't show you the options, but PowerShell
Without break, without quotes.
even with
Just say,
the same.
Then it's not enumerator. You can use enumerator to use stuff.
Yeah, but
Yeah, you can make one.
well, it works here, of course. But if I try to
No,
Bring
and
the-
if the variable is enumerator, you
Yeah.
can use tab
okay,
to
yeah,
go
okay,
through
yeah.
this. But if it's not, then yeah.
here you have option to go tab and get it. So with a normal view, you will get bunch of red text, and this is not a big example, but so if I go back here, by the way, if you type CD on PowerShell Core, it takes you to your home, and if you type CD in the PowerShell, it takes you to nowhere, basically to where you are right now. And this is also different, takes you home.
this CD is set location or it's CD,
It's CD.
and set location will do.
It's probably an alias, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure.
Try get alias.
So yeah,
Okay.
it's CD. Okay.
That's a bad choice. I think I have some CDs in my script somewhere, and it will.
But it's
switch to the
consistent
wrong
with
folder.
Linux, right? Or would this be the 7
Yeah, but this
So that's
this
not
alias
really-
is a bad choice.
Yeah.
I mean, going to your home folder when you do CD, because everywhere it just shows you the current path.
So I have error. I have a script with an error in it, and this is the normal error that view that we got before. But with this concise view, this looks much nicer. It tells me that on line 5, so I can go. Yeah, it's nice. And I can go back here, put the and now it works. Then there is another thing called get error.
Just keep it.
Okay, so there is a get error commandlet, and this looks like a little bit broken here, but not broken, but the lining is not correct, probably because of the font. But basically, you get all the information from the error you would like to get, and this actually can help really with troubleshooting, like when you change versions of PowerShell and try to run your old script in the new version, and something doesn't work. This is something that you should be using to find out. Also, you can, this gets just the last one, but you can find, like, run it with multiple errors and select the correct single error and stuff like that. Another demo, I'm gonna speed up a little bit. We got here. Another thing related to error is something that I also really like. It's error action preference. And normally it's continue, and we have continue in PowerShell, in Windows PowerShell. But if you want to troubleshoot something and find out what's wrong, you can use pester, or you can say stop. But if you run it with stop, it will still actually run the entire piece of code, and it's not very nice for debugging. And now we have break. That's new. So if I run it with break, and then I try to run a different script, it tells me that I'm entering debug mode. I can get H for help. What I really want is to list the source, and I can see that on line 5 the problem is that I'm trying to divide by 0. And if I run the code like this, it will tell me that here, of course, but for debugging, this view is much nicer than this. And you see, if you run it, it goes, I think now it's back to continue. It goes to oops, but in here it didn't run the whole thing. It showed me where the oops actually is. And again, if I switch this error view into the classic one, then I will just get a bunch of red text. But this shows me nicely, go to line 5 in your little script and don't divide it by 0. Okay.
So if I do this in VS Code, will it go to the built-in debugger? Can I debug through it normally, or do I have to use this weird text menu?
I will tell you right now.
You're in PowerShell 5.
Yeah. Okay.
And you can switch it on the bottom.
Yeah, I don't have it there. It's PowerShell 6.
You are in 7 now.
Yeah, I'm in 7 now, so it should be okay here. I'm not sure where is F5 on my virtual machine.
Ooh, it works.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So even better. And again, this is something that was just released in the a few weeks ago in PowerShell 7 release candidate 2.
Nice.
And it's coming into stable version in a couple of weeks.
So how do you fix this problem? Do you remove the division by 0, or do you make a double and it will return not a number?
Well, it's easy, you cannot divide anything by 0, so...
Well, you can divide double by 0.
Yeah, you can, but what do you do?
That's more fun. Oh, sorry, go on.
Okay. So those are the new things. I'm thinking what else we have. I'm not sure actually how to demo that, but there are like some improvements in invoke REST method and like. Do you use PowerShell to interact with like web APIs and stuff like that? There are a couple of few parameters here in PowerShell 7. Probably the best way to test it is to go and take a look at like some example that you are actually using and doing. What I find out, there is a parameter, and I don't know how it's called, so let's find out.
Aren't you going for REST method, not web
Yes.
request?
I think it's in both. Okay.
Skip.
No. It's called ignore HTTP. Don't remember. Actually, don't remember. Anyway, that was not part of the demo. But there are some improvements. As I said, I didn't get the chance to use it, but that was also on the list for the the new things. I think we can find it. Invoke REST method, skip certificate. Yeah, this one. Skip HTTP error check. And basically you would use this in case that like there are some errors that you expect and you know how to handle, but you still want to get the result and still get the information from the website. And without this, it will just tell you the error. But with the skip HTTP error check, you can actually still get info from the site you are trying to reach.
Like if I want to test that if I create the same user, it will tell me the error code that it should.
If you try to create what user?
So just like call it once, create a user, it will return 201 created, and then I try it again, and then my service that I'm testing should tell me, no, this user already exists, and just give me some error code like 400 bad request.
Yeah, I
so
see.
Otherwise, this would throw.
It will throw you the error, yeah. And with this one, you can
Just
actually
get the normal recall.
get the result.
Cool.
So okay.
PowerShell 7.
Yeah, thank you. It's good. Okay. So another thing, just a quick one. Select string looks a little bit different now. So if you have some text, I don't know, I like pizza, and you say select string, and you say pizza. It looks like this. It highlights it. So it's just like a graphic. If you have like a text with a lot of lines and you want to select a string, it will show you just that line in the previous PowerShell. But here it shows you the entire line and actually highlights the search string.
Do you know how it does the highlighting? Because like 5 days ago, I think Jim Thier from the PowerShell team created a bug in Pester that the NUnit output is broken because escape can be in the error. So maybe like all the colors are done through like escape signs. So maybe it's the same way. I just find it kind of weird because then I just get the output in a file and there's a lot of escapes.
I don't know. That's something to think about. There is one actually. There is a way to show it normally. So this is like the old result, and without no emphasis parameter is the new result. Okay. What else? Split. Yes, we all know that we can split some text in PowerShell. Now it's possible to split from the other side, and you use minus for it. So we have, let's say, we have the same text. I like pizza, and I say, I don't need this, I need this. Split, it will split like this. If I say split, I don't know how many we have, 2, then it will split in 2. This already existed, but now we can say split split by 2 minus 2. And it actually, you see, it's exactly the opposite from this here. So it goes from the end. And this actually, I just find out that this came by, this was implemented or suggested and delivered by PowerShell community, not by PowerShell team. So someone created a request on GitHub and it was accepted, and now it's in full version of PowerShell.
Do you know who that was?
No, I don't.
I suspect IIS reset me. PwSh.exe. I'm gonna find it. Do you know if it has any effect on the regex that you do? Because regex usually goes from left.
Yeah, I know. Actually, I don't know. We can try something. But
I don't know how to simulate that. It's just, if you already digged into it.
no. All new for me as well. It came out really like recently, couple of, I don't know when it was released, I think 2 weeks ago. Release candidate 2. Okay. What else? That's about it. Yeah, there is one more thing. I again don't know how it's called. It's interesting. So if I say, let's say, get command, get all commands, doesn't matter, and I want to, I want some really long one, like for example, update DSC configuration. I can of course type update and then tab and then go like this and try to find it, or update then D and then try to find it. But with PowerShell 7 you can use this, and then you use capital letters or C, and then you press tab, sorry, need to, and it completes it for you. But this works only here in the shell, that you cannot use it in the script. So if you use this inside of the script, of course it will not recognize it as a command. But in here I press tab and I get this. So let's find something else. Uninstall trusted provisioning certificate. Cool.
Well, did it not work if it's just UTP? Like, does it have to be the whole thing?
Well, probably if there is nothing else after. So there is UTP, it's this one. So let's test UTP. It will give me nothing.
So it's like a set of predefined ones. It's not that it's kind of scanning or interpolating over them.
Yeah, strange.
If you don't remember the full name, then you need to.
Oh, sorry, this one is not TP, this is PP. PP. Sorry, so no, let's try it like again. So
But I can see UTP.
TP, yeah, so it doesn't go, doesn't work.
So is that feature of BS Readline or PowerShell 7?
It's in PowerShell 7. And
You
that's
need
it.
to improve it through open source.
You are the programmer here, you can add it. Okay, so that's about like all those new features. I'm trying to think something that we wrote here on this list, but we didn't include in demo.
Can you show get child item? You said in PowerShell 7 it will be more.
Yeah.
So the mode.
Yeah, so this is what you would get like with shit. I think actually that utilized it on Linux only. We are here in the Windows. So let's see what's the difference. It's not gonna work. Yeah, of course not. So on Windows I guess there is no difference. One extra thing actually. So we like, for example, there are some commandlets that they didn't exist on PowerShell 6, like I don't know, get hotfix, for example, that was not in PowerShell 6. Now it's back in PowerShell 7. Then also like out grid view didn't work on PowerShell 6. It's now back on PowerShell 7, and it's actually improved. So if you go, I don't know if you ever used the out grid view. I guess someone did. This is what we get, and then you can go here, search here, find this. But then that was normal in PowerShell 5. PowerShell 7 gives us also this pass through, and actually that collect. So let me show you how that works. We can now like, let's say, select something here. Command line with different on Mac, and I press OK, and actually it passed that information from the out grid view back here to shell, and actually shows me the process only for those I selected. And so if I do this, and then I go out grid view pass through, and then I say stop process, what that will do, it will pass this process to the pipeline, and it killed Notepad. That's useful. Of course, you should not be doing this and then randomly select things here. Okay, so that's also new. Let me it doesn't work here. And this works on Linux actually, so you can get with pauses, and you can get it slowly down. Okay.
What does it do? Less?
It's like this. Why doesn't work here? Okay.
It shows one page of the
One page at a time, yeah. So and there is nothing here extra. But if you do that on Linux, it will work even with the get process. Actually, let's now go back to our Azure. So that's one of the last things that I wanted to show. And I think this is the demo. It might be interesting at the end. So first thing, in Azure we have PowerShell, Cloud Shell, and if you run Cloud Shell in here or in your computer or like in VS Code, hold on. You will see that that's PowerShell Core, and Microsoft is not up to date here. And it's interesting that it's running now on a Linux instance. This can change. I'm getting different results. Sometimes in Windows containers, sometimes in Linux. But as you can see here, this is full version of PowerShell Core. And nice little feature in PowerShell in Cloud Shell is that you can use it here with the VS Code implemented, and you can write your script here. I forgot to demonstrate that in VS Code in your computer you can run like two of them at the same time, or you can switch it. Switch to PowerShell, and you can do the same thing there. Okay, back to Azure. Another place where PowerShell Core is used is in function apps. So, anyone here working with Azure?
Yeah.
Good. For those of you who don't work with Azure, one of the features or option there is you can run a new that you can create a function. That's basically serverless instance where you can run some of your code and it will be executed for you using the resources in the cloud. And it's called function app. And there are different. Okay, let's try to create one new one. I'm just going to show you when you're creating it. There are different stacks you can use. Those are supported, and one of them is PowerShell Core. When this was first introduced, I really didn't see the usage, where and why I should be using it. But actually, it grows on I like it a lot now. I use it in many different for many different tasks. I'm going to show now one of them. Unfortunately, I cannot show you those production tasks that I have because I didn't have time to, or didn't have place to copy it from production and to clean up all the code where we have some customer information. So I created one demo function app that uses PowerShell, and I can show you what this is doing. Okay, so this entire subscription here is a test subscription, but I have and it's paid by Microsoft, which is good. I'm not paying for it. So I created one function here, and actually I didn't wrote this myself. I used this from one of my colleagues, and so this function here is actually the function of this function is simple. It checks the status of virtual machines that we have in Azure. And I can even use it to initiate the start or stop of the virtual machine. And the idea behind it is, first, you shouldn't have this publicly available, like somewhere on the internet, that anyone who knows URL can do this to your virtual machines. But the idea here is that we have some place where the code is stored, and this function has proper rights over this resource group. Idea is that you can run script that it's not actually connected to Azure. It doesn't have those let's say commandlets installed, but you can still use it to get some information from Azure. Probably better example that I'm going to give you is I use it in, for example, as identity management for a client, where we have script running in function app, and when there is like a new user or something, or user needs to be changed, added to different groups or stuff like that, we have a code running here in PowerShell function. That's actually doing this maintenance task and adding user, removing user, and stuff like that. We also have it to build like a new Azure environment for some testing purposes, and that can be called from different script where you call the function and then function actually do it for you. I was doing it before in PowerShell automation, Azure automation, but this is actually much more nicer and works well. Anyway.
Can you install modules on the script? Or is it, I mean, if you want to use some command that's from a module, how would you do it here?
In here in PowerShell in function?
Yeah, in function. So would you actually have it?
You will have it remote into a server where those modules are.
So this code has to be.
Yeah, this has to be a clean whatever is included in PowerShell. You cannot get anything extra to it. Actually, no, I'm actually lying. Yeah, there you can, and the way to do it is obviously you have to, here in the code you have to say install module and call the module, but the way to do it, to get that module installed, and that's the part I don't know now. Maybe someone else will know. You will get like install feature, not feature.
There was this integrate button, is it related?
In here, no, I was not doing it in here.
It's okay, it's just...
Maybe you can try to add some function just to import if it will work on it.
Well, like I'm working with with Office 365 modules and everything from inside of here, but I'm doing it in that way that I have a management machine from to which it remotes and call it from there. But I'm not an expert on Azure functions, so probably there is a way to do it, because I've seen like examples and scripts where they have like import module directly in here, and it worked somehow. Okay. All right. That's it on my demo list. It was longer than I expected and slower. And I hope you are not sleeping back in there, because I cannot see you very well. No? Okay. just woke up now. Good. I hope you had a good sleep. That's it. So to go back to the original presentation, we have one more slide. And now that slide is conclusion. To use it or not to use it, that is the question. Well, for me, that's easy question. I'm actually using it, and I will continue to use it. I think PowerShell 7 or PowerShell Core brings some like very important advantages over the previous versions of PowerShell. There is a little bit like the thing is that it's still, as we said before, there are a couple of different versions. You don't know which one to use, and you still have to manually actually install it on servers or your infrastructure, and maintain, update, upgrade whenever new version is available. With integrated Windows PowerShell, that's it in your Windows servers, you don't take care of that, because usually Microsoft takes care of that, and there are no any changes for a long time, so you don't need it. If you are using Linux, I don't think PowerShell will actually, even though you can use a lot of commandlets, like things like, I don't know, get process, get file, and stuff like that, it works on Linux. But if you already know Bash and you use it that way, this is not going to convince you now to start using Linux. Sorry, to start using PowerShell on Linux. Where it makes sense for me, for Linux, and where I use it actually for Linux, is desired state configuration. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with desired state configuration. I use it with some clients where they have specific requirements, and using it with Linux, it's really easy. It's actually the only way to do it, and before that was only possible on Windows, and now we can use it on Linux, and for me that's the greatest benefit. Other than that, I used it like, I don't know, to configure like a cron job or something like that, and not because I wanted to use PowerShell for that, but because I didn't know how to do it otherwise. And for me, it was easy to find the commandlets to do it on Linux, but for Linux people, they know Bash, then that will probably be easier way for them to do. On Mac, I already mentioned that. Don't use it to control your Mac. Use it on your Mac to control other things, or to write a script. And for using it in production, I'm planning to deliver PowerShell 7 on some of the servers, because when we have like a multi-platform environment, we can then run the scripts on all of them and configure the same things on all the servers. So that's it. I don't know why I have here how to install update on GitHub. If you want to install it or update it, you go to GitHub, PowerShell GitHub, you find it there, and there are all instructions you need. So yeah, that's it.